Alright guys, this video is dedicated to our British invasion boys here on the YouTube comic book community, because basically this is a story about apparently coming of age in an English school in the 70s. And basically back when I was I know I was 21, and so this is probably December 94, maybe going 95, there was this anthology book that came out. Anybody that's kind of watched my videos or talked to me over the years know that I'm a Michael Moorcock / Elric fan, amongst other things. And but what was so great about this one book coming out was a hardback book that came out. It had tons of other writers writing short stories of Elric that kind of bobbed and weaved and inside the Elric continuity there in Michael Moorcock's novels and stuff. But it had a new short story by Michael Moorcock. It had a story which had me excited by Gary Gygax, the guy who, I hope I'm saying his name right, who created Dungeons and Dragons. And then I think it was the last story actually in the book out of tons of short stories in this hardback by Neil Gaiman, and his was just a little bit different. And I have images of little bits and pieces from some of those stories that I read. I ended up reading the whole thing. I skipped around and stuff. I remember there's one story where, I think a wolf is chasing somebody through the woods, and our hero describes how he's jumping over logs and stuff running through there, and stories with girls and stuff, and Moonglum, his companion, is there. I remember bits and pieces of it. But Neil Gaiman's story really stuck out because it was a whole new take on Elric and Michael Moorcock, and that story was called Life Furnished in Early Moorecock. And it was just this great short story. And I've always described Neil Gaiman as being deceptively aloof. As you read the story and stuff, and it feels like you're just reading a slice of somebody's life, and it's written very simple and stuff, and it feels very real. But he doesn't make it obvious on how to connect the dots to get all the symbolism and what he's saying there and things like that. And that's one of the things about this story. If you just read it, you're going to have to really dig a little bit there. So Neil Gaiman at this time was famous for Sandman. By 94, 95, the book had blown up, and brought in a whole new, more or less, generation of readers, and brought in women into reading comic books and stuff like that. And he had an issue 50. And issue 50 was a story called Ramadan. I think that's what it was called. And it was by P.Craig and Neil Gaiman both. P.Craig was, doing the art. But what was different about this is that it seems like I remember reading how Neil Gaiman was talking about deadlines and stuff like that. So he hadn't actually written out the story in comic book form. He talked to P.Craig and kind of told him what the story was, and Russell just said, just type that out, just do the story that way. P.Craig apparently has the talent of actually just taking a story. He doesn't need a script. He can take a story and he can interpret it and write and add the words and everything that he needs to that way. He can hit the high points. He can keep the story flowing. And that's what he did with this. In 1996, Topps came out with One Life. Now, this is the comic book adaptation of that short story that I just set you through. And this is actually considered Elric number 0, One Life, because apparently it's a prequel to Stormbringer. I think Dark Horse and Topps Comics somehow cut a deal to finally do the comic book adaptation of the last book of an Elric series called Stormbringer. So in the back you get to see a little sample. So basically, I think what they did is they used an available Neil Gaiman story. Neil Gaiman was hot, and they were using that to get people's attention to, hey, look what we're doing over here at Topps Comics. We're doing an Elric stuff. We have a Neil Gaiman story here. And that's why they put the preview in. But anyway, Richard Gray, on the cover there, that is Richard Gray. And I'm thinking he's like 12, maybe 13 or something like that. But you see him reading a book, and he's reading Michael Moorcock books, probably specifically Elric books. And I just love it because, little kid sitting there reading, and he's sitting inside of Elric's famed dragon helmet, he puts on there. And I swear I remember reading how he could bring the wings down and cover his face when he's going into battle. Anyway, we open up and Richard Gray is just a kid sitting there writing his own. Let me get this straight. Reading his own, writing his own Elric story, and he gets in there a little bit and draws a few paragraphs, and he puts it up and says that he learned a long time ago, a little kid dramatic there, that you don't continue a story from a previous grade. Okay, so remember that. This is where I'm talking about Neil Gaiman being strangely aloof. As talking this stuff out also helps you figure out the story. So basically, you see this kid. He's sitting there. He's just flopping around and he's reading Elric stories and he's talking about how he loves them, and he's just enthralled with them. And something about this just makes me feel like for Neil Gaiman, this is somewhat autobiographical. He talks about how he found the Elric books. He talks about how he was in Scotland and his dad bought the paperback for him that was spinning around the rack and stuff. And that one book that he really, really wanted, The Sleeping Sorceress, this is where Elric got to meet other characters in Michael Moorcock books that are in different universes in those. And it's, people like Elric met Ericos in Corm and stuff. He also met him, and I was right here with the kid because I read Sailor on the Sea of Fate when he met all these people. And Moorcock has his universes, his books set up to where they're all different universes and different adventures and stuff, but there's an eternal champion, and they're all the same person, different facets of them. Much like, the Endless have different facets and stuff like that. And this boy just had his own little world here. Things are still simple. He's still kind of a kid. He's in between being a kid and going into adolescence. And he's drawing stories and stuff, and he's got this paranoia that, maybe I would go back and finish my Elric story, but he worries about Michael Moorcock getting in trouble with him. And there's pictures of Michael Moorcock in here that actually happened. So he skips a grade. He gets to skip a grade because he's so smart. So this is where it becomes about that adolescence phase where we become sexually aware as boys, or things start happening in the dreams and things with the body. But where he's a year younger, it actually feels sinister. Neil Gaiman gives you this feeling like you want to protect this boy from it, because he shows how the boys are sort of, you kind of see it through the kid's eyes. You don't know what's coming, but the boys, he's got the other characters in the boys' school stuff being a little bit more perverted, and things are a little bit more intense, and the teachers actually feel creepy and stuff. You actually feel like the boy's in danger. That's where the tension comes from. And there's like peepees and stuff drawn on chalkboards and stuff that he's just oblivious to because he's got his head in a book. And the people forget that he's a year younger. He doesn't seem to really have a lot of friends, and people are always coming and getting him because he's writing his stories or he's reading the Michael Moorcock books, and he's missing out going outside and playing and doing gym and doing recess. And he's got this huge problem about being naked and having to shower after gym. And apparently in the English schools, according to this, in the 70s, this is why I'm dedicating to the British invasion boys that don't know, you took a shower and then you also had to use the tubs. And he just felt humiliated by it, and he was thinking if he was Elric, he wouldn't have to stand outside in the cold waiting to be picked and having to take showers. It's ridiculous to even think of. And the boys start talking about pubic hairs and stuff like that. He just goes on keeping life simple because he's a year younger than him, thinking about his stories. And then something happens in the middle of the story that I remember reading this in the book that just blew my mind. Richard is sitting there against the wall just reading his Elric book. And one of the older kids comes up, and the kid is just maybe 2 or 3 older than him, but he's already the size of an adult. That's how they describe him. And he's talking about Richard's suit. Just he can't even get his tie right, so he grabs the tie and he tightens it for him. They walk off laughing, and he's choking, and he hits the ground where he can't breathe. And while he's knocked out, all of a sudden he starts hallucinating. He looks up, and down at the end of the very wall is Elric. And he follows Elric into that world. And this is where the rabbit, they talk about rabbits in this, the word rabbit pops up, rabbit stews. He talks about how Elric's blood eyes, as he's peering at him, look like something that an angry rabbit had when he was younger, the red eyes. So he starts following Elric into this new world and stuff, and Elric's talking to him, saying, you want to be a companion of heroes? And he makes him look at him. He won't look at Elric because his eyes are freaking him out. He's an albino, so they're pink and angry. And he says, he says, you're no champion. You're no companion of heroes. And he's like, well, what am I? What am I? And like Alice in Wonderland, Alice following the white rabbit, that's what he is doing with Elric. He's following him into this great world. And he even says the further he goes into it, the further away he feels from the real world. and he discovers that he's an artist, and he starts sculpting. He spends a lifetime on these great sculptures, and he grows to be an old man, and then he grabs his neck, and he's jerked out of that world because back in the real world, where'd he go? Back in the real world, the boys are freaking out because they found him. They thought he was faking it, and they undo the tie and they bring him back, and they're all scared of getting in trouble and stuff, and they're like real apologetic. And it's almost like he's disappointed he's back. He goes until he sees the nurse, he sees the headmaster. He says that they gave him a bitter, soluble aspirin from a huge jar. What a bitter pill to swallow because you're back in the real world. That's how I read it. And of course he goes to the headmaster, and the headmaster said, well, that boy saved your life, so you'd be lucky you're here. And you go on, don't say another word about it. And we go on to this harsh reality where a teacher takes a rabbit after that's all over with, and he guts it, and he shows him how you can take the bladder, hook it up to an air pump, and blow it up, and the thing actually explodes all over the boys. You know, and he's just like, oh, come on. And then the teachers get kind of creepy. They're asking him, like, are you becoming sexually aware? Almost like you can't tell if they're like counseling these boys and they're just insensitive, or is this guy a pervert? He's wanting to know what's he doing at night, excessively or not excessively. Very embarrassing questions because he's not there yet. They keep forgetting he's a year younger than the other boys. And he won't eat, and it goes on about how they eat, and he's suspicious of the food because he thinks they're putting rabbit in the stew Thursday nights instead of beef, and he supposedly finds a rabbit's paw in there, so Thursdays he doesn't eat dinner. So it goes on, and he's ordering Elric books. He talks his dad into getting him an Elric book, and when it comes in from this book club, it turns out it was 25 pence more than what it should have been, so he's a little bit paranoid that one day they're going to come after him for those 25 pence. And in the very book that he ordered, it has a biography of Michael Moorcock saying that he had died of lung cancer the year before. This was a real rumor. They actually published one of his books saying that he had died of lung cancer. And of course he hadn't, and they actually have Michael Moorcock's comments on the matter when it was going on. That's why I started thinking it was biographical. And then he's starting to become, puberty is finally starting to hit. And this is where he becomes kind of sexually aware. And he goes from having dreams of Elric and finding peace and stuff. I mean, there's a whole great prose here to read how this boy is, so all of a sudden he has a sexual dream finally. And it goes on to there, and then it starts up bringing religion. He's being pressured to find his own religion. He's getting pushed into adulthood. It's time to leave your childhood behind and stuff. And these stories and finding out who he is and Elric and stuff, that's what the one thing extra he has that the other kids don't. And then this is where P.Craig Russell was a genius. He kind of took them in. And I'm doing this because this is literary. This is not to be perverted or anything like that. But the images start getting suggestive. At the top there's a cupboard, wardrobe, and the way it opens. And then, he went from these magnificent, simple pictures of Elric being a hero to where they're getting suggestive. He's stabbing a person, and the soul getting ripped out by Stormbringer, and the energy going into him is almost orgasmic and suggestive. The sword penetrating the flesh becomes suggestive. He's starting to grow up, and these things are starting to happen, and you have a wide open hole for the mailbox and stuff. And it's very subtle. I mean, it's not, to me, this is not, out and out perverted or anything like that. It's just very, wow, And then he starts getting more aggressive daydreams and stuff about, there's some other things going on. He gets more suggestive, he gets a little bit more aggressive. Testosterone, what it is that, it's a boy coming to age. He's got testosterone going through there, so he's thinking about, like, now he's getting more aggressive. He starts having daydreams of kidnapping Michael Moorcock and hold him captive to make him tell him where his ideas came from so he can be a writer like him one day or something, and it's heroes. And there's more quotes from actual Michael Moorcock. And, and I think you get the idea that goes on from there. It goes on from rabbits to wolves and stuff. And it's just a great little story about coming of age and stuff like that. And it just really fascinated me and stuff because, what a way to take an Elric story. You get handed, Neil Gaiman was handed this opportunity, I'm picturing, you get to tell an Elric story. And, sorry guys, of telling an Elric story. And he turns it on its head, and then when you read it, it's just about a boy being uncomfortable in school and being fascinated with life and fascinated with these Moorcock books. And then when you look underneath the surface and stuff, it turns out it's about a whole lot more. So anyway, that's it. Thanks for sticking around. That's my book review. And, check it out. It's not bad. Not bad at all.